Hi, everyone. I want to say good morning, good evening, whatever time it is. So you took test two. Hopefully you did well. All right, we are moving on with medical terminology, and specifically, we're looking at chapter 9. Chapter 9, talking about the cardiovascular system. Cardio means heart, vascular means vessels. So we're talking about the heart and the vessels. So for the body, what we're talking about, the heart is the pump, right? And the vessels, they're the tubes that are going to carry the blood, right? So what's the blood? The blood has all kinds of stuff. There's red blood cells, there's white blood cells. Red blood cells is to carry oxygen, white blood cells for immunity, and there's everything else. There's water, there are nutrients, your carbohydrates, your lipids, your proteins, your electrolytes. And truly, the heart is the pump that's moving all the nutrients and waste around the body. And the vessels or the vasculature, right, that's moving that around. So let's go ahead and take a look, right? So the functions and organs of the cardiovascular circulation through the chambers of the heart. So we're going to talk about that, the heart anatomy and the way blood flows through there. Commonly used sites for taking the pulse, explain blood pressure, right? That's used a lot. It's pressure, the pressure on the vessels, okay? And it matters, when we talk about hypertension or hypotension, that's important. Terminology used in ICD, spell, pronounce medical words, drugs that are used in this chapter, diagnostic lab tests. Okay, and some abbreviations. And just like before, we have homework for this chapter and we have my lab activities. Okay, cardiovascular, also known as the circulatory, circulates blood by the action of the heart. So it's a closed system, okay? Here's the heart. Blood goes away from the heart via the arteries. The word arteries, they are the vessels taking blood away from the heart, goes down, goes to the capillaries. Capillaries, that's where the nutrient and waste exchange happens. Then the blood comes back to the heart via the veins, okay? And it's a closed loop. So if you can imagine a circle and the heart is the pump that's moving it around, coming back, moving around, coming back. And there's going to be blood flow between the heart and the lungs. We call that pulmonary circulation. And blood flow between the heart and the rest of the body, we call that systemic circulation. So circulates blood by action of the heart, provides cell with oxygen and nutrients, because in the blood, that's where the nutrients and the oxygen are. And then the tissues are doing their job and they're releasing waste. So that's going to be picked up by the blood. And then, for example, the gases will go to the respiratory system and we exhale the waste. Goes to this urinary system where we're going to get rid of the waste, the fluid, whatever the other wastes are. So blood flows through the heart to the lungs, back to the heart, and to various parts. Okay. So some important terminology: heart, right? Muscular pump that circulates the blood. Arteries, their vessels transport blood from the right, okay, to all parts of the body. Think of transport blood away from the heart. So arteries, the big thing, they transfer blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood back to the heart. So it says back to the heart. Capillaries, they're the tiniest vessels. That's where the nutrient and waste exchange happens. And then blood, right? This talks about all the things that are in blood. So we have water, we have the cells, erythrocytes, those are red blood cells, thrombocytes, leukocytes. Leuko means clear, right site cell, plasma. So it talks about what's in the blood, what's circulating. Okay, so here's a great picture, okay? Of course, anatomically, it's not correct, but it's just showing blood flow from the heart to the lungs. So, and it's blue. The reason it's blue is because it's deoxygenated, so it's low in oxygen. Goes from here to the lungs. It's in the lungs that it gets oxygenated, right? The O2 gases go into the blood, and now it's red, goes back to the heart and then to the rest of the body. And then here are the capillaries, and here are where the nutrient and waste exchange occurs. And then the blood comes back, goes there, and then comes back, right? So here's this idea of this closed system where the heart is the pump. It's a muscular pump, and the vessels are like the highways, right, that are moving the stuff along. And then the nutrient and waste exchange occurs at the capillaries. And here are the arteries taking blood away from the heart, capillaries where nutrient and waste exchange occurs, and then blood coming back via the veins back to the heart. So this is a really, nice picture, even though it's anatomically not correct, right? But here is the respiratory circulation or pulmonary circulation, excuse me. And here is, the systemic circulation. Now, when we talk about the heart, we'll talk about the right side and the left side. It's always the patient's right and left. So for example, this side is the right side. So this is an anterior view. So imagine the person's head's over here and they're looking at you. So if the person's head is here and they're looking at you, you have to put your body in there. So this would be the right side. If I could get my pointer, this would be the right side and this would be the left side. So this is the right atrium, right ventricle. Here it says pulmonary artery. Here's the case where there's an artery because it's taking blood away from the heart, but it has blue blood. The reason it has blue blood is because it's deoxygenated. Now, blood goes here, gets oxygenated, comes back. Here's pulmonary vein because it's carrying blood back to the heart. Then this is the left atrium, left ventricle, and then up. Now these are the aorta. This is the aorta, the aortic arch. And then you have blood going up to the head, giving the head some nice, nutrient-rich blood, going back down, some to the arms, to the legs, etc. So it says blood low in oxygen and high carbon is deoxygenated. It's the blue blood, right? Red blood high in oxygen because it came from the lungs, high in oxygen. But then it goes and then gives nutrients to the tissue. So when it comes back, it's going to be deoxygenated. So here's some anatomy. This is more anatomically correct, right? So if you're looking at the body, the diaphragm would be right here. So here's the heart and here are the lungs. So the heart and lungs, really close proximity. And again, this is anatomically correct. So here are the vena cava superior, vena cava superior from the top. Down here is the inferior vena cava. So they're bringing the deoxygenated blood to the right side of the heart, right atrium, right ventricle, then goes up through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, gets oxygenated back, and then to the rest of the body. So really close proximity. And this is in the thoracic cavity in the chest, yes. So heart lies slightly to the left of the midline. Yes, we could see that. It is tilting to the left a little bit. Beneath the sternum, yes, the sternum, it would be the breastbone, so it would be right under that. And has 3 layers of linings. There are linings that are lining the heart. Endocardium, myocardium, pericardium. If we cut through the heart, right here are the heart walls, it's considered a hollow muscular organ, okay? Hollow, it has to be hollow because the blood's going to flow through. Muscular, yes, there's muscle, okay? And then the endo is inside. The endocardium, cardio means heart. Endocardium is going to be here. Myo, what did myo mean? Muscle, right? Muscle, okay? So here's the myocardium. It's the middle layer, if I can get my pointer, right? So myocardium. And then the peri, what does peri mean? Around, okay? The pericardium. So here are the layers. The endocardium in the inside, myocardium in the middle, and pericardium. Now, this is a really important picture. This is not an anatomy class, but it's a medical terminology class, and you kind of have to have your anatomy down a little bit, right, to understand those words. So this gives you orientation, and if you have something that you can look at, then everything else is a little easier, right? So again, this is always the what side? Right. Atrium is a chamber, it's a small chamber. Right ventricle, another chamber. The pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary artery, takes blood to the lungs, comes back through the pulmonary veins, left atrium, left ventricle, then up through the aorta. So here's the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. Now, these things, what are these things? These things are the valves, and you say, okay, what's the point of the valves? Well, when the heart pumps, imagine this thing, and it's going to squeeze, and the blood has to go up. I'll put some videos up so you can look at heart function. That really helps, okay? So when these chambers squeeze, whoosh, imagine them, squeezing up, okay? The blood needs to go up this way. What's going to keep it from going backwards, okay, from going this way? Well, the valves do. The valves close. Imagine the valve closes. Of course, this is only like one-dimensional, but in reality, it would be three-dimensional. But imagine if the valve closes and the only way the blood can flow is this way. And same thing here, the valve closes and the only way the blood can flow is that way. And that is the function of the valves. The valves will close, keeping the blood flowing in one direction. So the function of the valves are to keep the blood flowing in one direction. And truly, the valves are what cause the sound of the heart, literally in the textbook. If you look at, sounds of the heart and what they call them lub-dub. Lub-dub, lub-dub, right? The lub sound is when these valves close. They're known as the atrioventricular valves between the atrium and the ventricle, also known as the tricuspid. On the right side, it's the tricuspid valve. On the left side, it's the bicuspid valve. Tri means three. Cuspids, there's three flaps, okay? Then after the blood flows up, now these guys, they're called the semilunar valves, or here it says pulmonary valve, and then under here there's the aortic valve. They cause the dub sound. So these would cause the lub sound, these would cause the dub sound. I'm going to put a video that shows blood flow and that shows the sounds. Really look at it, because if you look at it and you look at the animation, it makes just so much more sense. All right. So circulation. So septum is this part right here. It's the wall between the right side and the left side. Divides the heart into right and left heart. Each side contains upper and lower chamber. Atria, the upper chamber, receive the blood. The ventricles, lower chamber, pump the blood. Valves control the intake outflow of the blood in the chambers. So they're talking about the atria, the ventricles, the valves, the interventricular septum, or it's also called interatrial between this side, intraventricular between that side. So beautiful picture showing the heart valves and showing the blood flow. So here, right, the blood flow. I won't, I do want you to know the anatomy, like atria, ventricles, superior, inferior vena cava, etc. So you do need to know that, because that gives you, that gives you reference, like a reference point. Here's a view of the heart from the top. If we're looking up from the top down, so that's a superior view. And here you can see the valves. So this is why it's called tricuspid, because there's three flaps. Mitral is also the bicuspid valve, and these are the semilunar valves. So right atrium, right side, it says thin-walled space, right? The right side is not as thick. Look at how thick this is compared to that. It's not as thick. Why? Because the blood only has to pump to the lungs, and the lungs are bam, they're right here, right? So the right side of the heart doesn't have too much work to do. It's the left side that has a lot of work to do. And usually when people are having problems with the heart, it's usually the left side that's going to give them problems, because this side has to pump blood for the whole body, up to the head, to the arms, to the legs. And so this side is thicker. Look at the myocardium here versus the myocardium there. And not only that, usually when they have problems on the left side. So right atrium, deoxygenated blood passes through the tricuspid, through the right ventricle. That's what I said. Right ventricle going up, to the lungs. Yes, we already talked about that. Left atrium, we already talked about. Left ventricle, we already talked about. So we'll go ahead and stop here, and then we'll have another video in just a sec.